Welcome to Thinking Deeply About Primary Education, the podcast that makes time and space to think about pedagogy, teaching and learning, professional development, anything of interest to time-poor but enthusiasm-rich primary teachers. Now, this week we are very, very lucky to have Gareth Metcalfe rejoining us for a standing room-only CPD session on deconstructing word problems, where he goes through his 4 key principles for deconstructing word problems and how to support all pupils in becoming fantastic problem solvers. Now, as I mentioned on the podcast last week, this episode will feature lots of visuals. And so it's best watched either on Spotify, because you have videos on there, or by following the link in the description to the YouTube channel, where I'll upload the video in advance of this episode being released. Because unfortunately, most providers, such as Apple, only take the RSS feed, which is audio only. And so to get this across, we're going to need to use those 2 platforms. The audio format isn't really going to work for this sim. And so we're trying something a little bit different. If you enjoy the episode, if you enjoy Gareth's session, have any comments, leave a comment where you're listening, where you're watching, and let us know. We can continue the conversation, because I'm sure Gareth is really, really keen to hear about how you've enjoyed a session and about how you might use that in your practice going forward. So without further ado, let's spend some time thinking deeply about primary education.
So I want to be able to help all children to have success in being able to deconstruct worded questions, to be able to answer worded questions, for children to be able to apply the mathematical knowledge into different problem-solving tasks, including in worded questions. And I've been talking about the principles, which I'll go into, and how can we best do that for quite a while. But what I wanted to do also is provide a really comprehensive bank of resources for teachers to be able to outwork those principles. And so for about the last 3 years, I've been writing resources for each year group from year 2 to year 6 called Deconstructing Word Questions. I wanted to talk about the principles that lay behind them, so you've got a really clear understanding, so you can take away and think, this is how I can help children to be able to answer worded questions. And also to help you to be armed with the resources for you and your staff to have a coherent approach to, this is how we can do it, rather than just giving children worded questions. This is how children can be taught to deconstruct worded questions. Now, I wanted to talk about 4 of the main principles that I think are key to helping children to be successful here. Slowly revealing information, modeling questions with equipment and images successfully, making connections between different questions, and then using non-routine challenges. And just with non-routine challenges, this so that deconstructing worded questions isn't just a case of, I'll show you how to do one, now you do one, but it's legitimately an opportunity for children to problem solve in mathematics. We give them the tools, and then we give them different kinds of challenges to emerge into. So I want to start off by thinking about, what do I mean by these 4 principles? What can they look like? And I find it easy to do that with examples. So slowly revealing information in a question. Zara is making drinks. She has 4 litres of juice. Some information is hidden. How many drinks can Zara make? And in predicting what the information is that could be hidden, children are having to think about the question structure before anyone can give an answer. So I could say, what could it be? Is there anything else it could be? And then we could see, it's the amount of juice in each drink. That would enable me to be able to answer that question. So another example, this is one that I've used in year 2. There are 3 nests. There are, and something's hidden, how many eggs are there all together? What information could be here? Children think, what could that be? And then we could add in a picture in this instance. So now what could that information be? And again, children thinking about the structure of the question there. And then the information is revealed. So the next principle I want to get to is this idea of using visual representations. And hopefully everything that I'll have a look at now this will be kind of key, embedded in all the materials. But one of the things that I want children to be able to do is be active participants. So rather than me just bring up a visual representation to model this question, for children to have choices to make and for them to have to be active in their thinking. So there are 4 bags of sweets. There are 3 sweets in each bag. how many sweets altogether, which picture? So in this build-up, there'll be some questions where it will be an addition structure and some where there'll be multiplicative structures, and for children to look and think, well, which picture is it? It's this picture that represents the question, but children having to vote on which picture correctly represents the question. So another example here, there are 30 children in our class, 16 of the children walked to school, 11 children came by car, the rest of the children cycled. How many children in our class cycled to school? Then children look at the two different bar models and they've got to think which bar model represents the question. Is it the blue one? Is it the green one? And then we can all vote on that. So they're having to actively think in terms of the structure of the question. So in my resources, lots of use of visual representations, and one of the tools that's often used then for children, in this case in a discussion task, is to match questions to bar models. Which bar model represents each question? In this instance, all the numbers are the same, and so the children having to think, well, which question matches to which bar model, and that being a kind of normal technique that's used. One of the tools that I'd mentioned about was children making connections between different questions. And I want to come to a thing that's often mentioned to me is how children really struggle with how many more questions that involve calculating the difference. And I want to use this as a vehicle for talking about the power of what I'd call using minimally different questions, or children making connections between different kinds of questions. So again, with a question I've used with the Year 2 class, Dan has some hats, Tom has some hats. How many more hats does Dan have than Tom? Now this I would also think of in terms of the slow reveal, in that I've hidden the numbers so no one's giving the answer immediately. We first of all process the information in the question. And then I first use this question to say, well, which is the most helpful picture? So both images correctly represent the information, but then the children have to think, is it the blue one, is it the green one? It's the most helpful picture. And generally children say it's the green one, because there we can see the comparison of how many more. And then the discussion we go to is, it says more, so add 5 and 3. And children have had the time to process this question. They know that no, it's how many more. So we're looking for the difference. And then further on in the build-up, we have a look and compare these two different questions. Jen has 4 sweets. Amy has 3 more sweets than Jen. How many sweets does Amy have? And then Kim has 4 sweets. Rose has 3 sweets. How many more sweets does Kim have than Rose? Questions have the same answer. Do they not have the same answer? That's the children to discuss and vote on. And again, the visual representation showing the structure. And of course, we see that they have different answers. And we come to compare a question with 4 and 3 more, and 4 and 3 and how many more, and the different uses of the word more. And again, really helping children to make those key connections between those different questions, and not overemphasizing individual words outside of a context. So whereas children perhaps have underlined numbers and a key word, which might be more, here we see the importance of processing all the information in this question, and we identify what the key information is. Now, where it comes to children making comparisons between questions, one of the things I like to do is make tiny alterations from one question to the next. So let's say if we compare the second and the third question, Kim has 4 pens, Eve has 2 pens. How many pens do they have altogether? 6. And then we have Kim has 4 crayons. Eve has 2 more crayons than Kim. How many crayons do they have altogether? Now we see the difference between 4 and 2 and 4 and 2 more. We see the power of just that one word in this instance, and that the answer isn't the same. And we can offset those two questions and have a look, well, what's the same and different about the question? And therefore, what's the same and different about the answer? Children breaking down related questions. That's one of the key principles for me of children deconstructing word questions. So I wanted to look at this is an example I've used in Year 5, and I'm going to build up with some of the principles. So one of the examples in Build 1, I've just shown one example, is the idea of just hiding one piece of information so children don't immediately just give the answer. So here we have this discussion of what do children think that the hidden number could be, the hidden cost could be? What couldn't it be? What will it be approximately? We end up having this discussion of, Could it be £2.80? Or do you expect it to be £2.80 or more than £2.80 or less than £2.80? And the children are starting to think, well, how will the cost of the apple compare to the cost of the pineapple? And then they're starting to think already about the process of breaking the question down. And then essentially the question is broken down step by step. Now, one of the follow-up examples is this one. Just have a moment to read the question here. And the discussion we have is predict what's hidden. Do you think it will be an adult ticket or a child ticket? And the children say, it could be an adult ticket. What's the cost of an adult ticket at the cinema? But then we would only need the first piece of information, the first line. That's very straightforward to calculate. Almost all the children think it's going to be the cost of a child ticket, because then I need all the information. And then again, what I'm going to do, and I'll not labour on the point here, but then the questions, when that's revealed and then we see the actual cost, the question's then broken down step by step with a visual. And again, I'll not explain the maths, but we work out the cost of the adult ticket first, and then we see the cost of the 3 child tickets, and then we can calculate the cost of each ticket. Now, I talked about comparing related questions, and the first examples I gave were between minimally different questions. Here, we have questions that look very different from one another, but what they all do is they all rely on the same underlying mathematical structure. So here, these aren't minimally different questions. These are questions that are very different in appearance. But by putting them together, what we help children to do is see the relationship between these different mathematical tasks or these different worded questions. It's not like question 1's the money task and question 2 is the shape task. But what we come to see is actually these questions involve the same mathematics. I need to compare the first piece of information with the second piece of information in the questions, and then look at how I can break the questions down. So in this idea of comparing related questions, sometimes there'll be questions with very subtle differences between them. And sometimes it'll be more questions with a similar mathematical structure, particularly in this instance, between questions 2 and 3. Now, non-routine challenges. One of the criticisms, I guess, that could be made about using worded questions is it's not really problem solving. Because what we're doing is we're just telling the children the calculation that's required. So I think within these kinds of tasks, I wanted to show some examples of non-routine challenges. So one, the days and months task from year 3 looked at calculations which involve bordering a month, where we have to think how many days are in each month. Is it 30? Is it 31? And if we get to the last task from task B version 1, we have Amy was in Paris for all of February. Helen was in Paris for all of July. And wanting the children to address this is an interesting one, because actually none of the children quite got here initially. They all chose one answer or the other. Amy and Helen each spent 1 month in Paris. Of course, that's true. Helen was in Paris for longer than Amy. Well, of course, that's also true. And wanting to recognize that in this instance, both of those statements are true. Just one example of one of the non-routine challenges. Now, of course, the non-routine challenges are very varied. Let me share this one with you. This is a way of drawing out reasoning from just one example question. Lucy had 13 stickers. Kate had 4 packs of stickers. There were 6 stickers in each pack. So, of course, Kate has 24 stickers. Then Kate gave Lucy 5 stickers. And the question is, how many stickers do Kate and Lucy have altogether? When children answer that question, what we ask them to look for and explain is which piece of information is not needed. Now, often the children, what they do is they work out to finish with how many stickers Kate has and how many Lucy has. But the depth is actually recognizing that if Kate gave Lucy 5 stickers, that doesn't change the number that they have altogether. So actually that piece of information is irrelevant. And that is an example of a non-routine challenge, or you might call a piece of reasoning that helps children to go deeper in breaking down those worded questions. Another example of a non-routine challenge. This was one that I used in year 2. There were lots of questions that looked at different ways of making specific amounts of money with specific numbers of coins. So the extend task became, is it possible to 1? So can 61p be made with 4 coins? And the child demonstrating, yes, it can, because that's the example answer. And then the depth is the children being able to say and explain why it's actually impossible to make 51p with 3 coins. Why is that? And again, that's kind of one of the examples of the challenges to take children further, one non-routine challenges. So there, I guess we've got to the principles that underlie that I would say help children to be really successful in breaking down worded questions and help them to go deeper as well. Just one other example. This has been one of my favorites that links to one of the examples I've shared before. From the Compare the Info task for Year 5, a non-routine challenge. One of the questions below can't be answered. Explain why it cannot be answered. So the children look at question A. A sandwich and a drink costs £3.10. 2 sandwich and a drink costs £5.60. What is the cost of a drink? And the children here recognise it is possible to work out the cost of a drink because I can compare a sandwich and a drink to 2 sandwiches and a drink. That's an extra sandwich. I can work out the cost of a sandwich and then the cost of a drink. But when we get to question B, a slice of pizza and an apple costs £1.90. So there's different combinations of the cost of the pizza and the apple. But when we double that, we see 2 slices of pizza and 2 apples cost £3.80. The children recognizing actually that doesn't give us any extra information there because I've merely doubled all the information. So that's why question B can't be answered. And again, I think it's having these example tasks that mean that children go really deep and they are genuinely reasoning and problem solving when it comes to breaking down worded questions. It doesn't become a thing that is merely mechanical. Now, what I wanted to do was outline, not just so there, if you like, are the principles, but outline how are the resources that I'm creating, why have I made those resources rather than just sharing the principles? And practically, how could they be used? Now, it would be easy, I guess, to show an example, and I'll show part of an example of a ratio task family. So this looks at, if we want children to become expert in breaking down worded questions around ratio, and they're in year 6, and I can use this task family. And this, here, what we do is we essentially explore the concept of ratio and then little variations upon that. So children, by the end, hopefully will become really skilled in it. So if I just share part of the build-up, Max has 3 times as many conkers as Ben. A piece of information is hidden. How many conkers does Ben have? Children have to think, what could that be? And we generally get to, it could be the number of conkers Max has, it could be the number that they have all together, and we see all together they've got 12 conkers. And so how many conkers does Ben have? Which bar model represents the question? Is it the blue one? Is it the red one? Shouldn't have to justify why. We see it's the red one, and then the answer is broken down. We come to another question. For every 3 children at the park, there are 2 adults. There are a certain number of children at the park. How many adults at the park? I hide that number just so no one immediately comes to the answer. We think about the question, and then the number comes in. Which bar model? Is it the blue one? Is it the red one? We recognize this time it's the blue one because 45 doesn't represent all the children. It's all the people. It's the children at the park, and then we can see how many adults at the park. And there's another task in the build-up as well. And then children get to task A, where there are different questions with 2 potential bar models, and the children have to think which picture represents each question. Now, if you want to dig into the content of that, of course, just pause the video, have a look, and read those examples. And then there are further build-up tasks in Build 2. And then the children get to questions. We'll have a question, and there might be a part-complete bar model that will scaffold the children to be able to answer the question, the minimally different questions between question 1 and question 2. Some of the scaffolds removed then for the 3rd question. Task B version 2, the question is a little bit hard. There's an extend task. So all of the resources, I'm editing the year 6 resource at the moment to follow the same pattern, but all the resources will follow the same lesson structure. Now, I wanted to show what the actual resources would look like. So if I go to the year 2 example, so the resource itself has a PDF file, and the PDF file, you click here and you'll also be able to download the PowerPoint file, which can also be accessed as a Google Slides file. And so the resource has two files: the PDF file with the children's tasks on, and then essentially the slides, the teaching slides. So what we're looking at the moment is the teacher guide, which has got the map through the task. So we start with build 1, then we get to task A, then it's build 2, then we give the children task B version 1 or task B version 2, and then there's an extend task. And then we've got answers and we've got discussion points are outlined here. So I'm going to show you this task. This is from Deconstructing Word Questions for Year 2. We're going to have a look at task A, task B version 1, task B version 2, and the extend task. Now, of course, the other part to that, which I'll just showcase now, is the build task. This is a PowerPoint file. And again, I'm going to bring this up. We're about to have a look at this one. There's two parts of the resource, as there are to all the Deconstructing Worded Questions files. Now, what I've done, just so I'm not jumping between screens to show the task, is I've put them all on one screen so I can talk hopefully coherently through them. But I wanted to share this example. And the reason that I wanted to finish with this example is because I found it's been easy for me to explore one question structure, like the ratio one, and show all the little variations of ratio questions, which I think is great. So when it's in that unit of work, I can fit that ratio task in there, and it'll help children develop expertise in breaking down those kinds of questions. There are some task families, though, like this one called mixed operations, which involve a variety of different question structures, and children have to explore which question structure is it. And there's a detailed build-up. Now, all the tasks follow this structure. We begin with build 1. I actually shared this. I taught a lesson with a fabulous group of teachers in the school I've worked with in Doncaster. It was a real privilege to be there with a year 2 class. If I narrate how the lesson went and my thought process. So Tom has 5 pens. Ben has 3 pens. We have the visual representation. And then we have a look. Which questions can be answered? And the children have a think about this. How many pens do Tom and Ben have altogether? How many pens don't have a lid? And how many more pens does Tom have than Ben? And where we come to the children have to think, they discuss, then we come to see those 2 questions can be answered. We can't answer how many pens don't have a lid. We haven't got that information. Then we have Cam's book has 6 pages. There are 2 stickers on every page of Cam's book. So is the question, which question can be answered? Is it how many stickers in Cam's book altogether? Or is it how many stickers does Cam have left? And we get to, it's how many stickers in Cam's book altogether. To know how many stickers Cam has left, well, I guess, does he still have them? But we could say, I'd maybe need to know how many he started with to be able to answer that question. And then we have Helen has 10 apples. She shares the apples equally into 2 bags. And I might give the children a moment to think, well, what do you think the question will be here? And then we see, is the question how many apples are there altogether? Or is it how many apples are there in each bag? And we see the question here is how many apples are there in each bag? Because we already know how many apples there are. There are 10. So the question, the thing that we'd need to calculate is how many are there in each bag? And then the children move into task A. Task A is always given, or I've designed it as a discussion task. Sometimes we saw examples before which were matching questions to visuals. In this example, children have a look at the questions and have a look at the different possible answers. I have to think which question. Let me just pause for a moment so you can read the examples. If you want longer, then of course just pause the video. The kind of discussions we get into. So 10 people on the bus, then 4 people get off the bus. It will be how many people on the bus now. It's not how many boys on the bus, because it would be if it were, then there were 4 girls on the bus, how many boys on the bus. But with the other information that we're given, 4 people get off the bus, it's how many people on the bus now. And then we get to the example question. We discussed the question on the right-hand side. Jack buys 5 sweets. Each sweet costs 2p. It's how much money does Jack spend? To know how much money Jack has left, the depth is, we're saying, well, what other information would we need? We would need to know how much money he had. Then we get to the second part of the builder. So we're now in build 2, building children's skill, their familiarity with different worded questions. So again, in the ratio example we've got in year 6, we've got more example questions of increasing complexity that are broken down. In this instance, we have a slightly different technique comes in. So we have Rose has 4 packs of stickers. Beth has 2 packs of stickers. There are 5 stickers in each pack. And we say, well, what could the question be? Is there anything else it can be? And the children are coming up with different possibilities of what the questions could be, given this information. And then we have a visual that supports with that as well. So again, what could the question be? Children come up with different possible questions. Then, when questions are presented, children are asked, which information do we need to be able to answer this question? Rather than children thinking we always need all the information, now they have to select the information that's needed. How many stickers does Beth have? And what we come to see, well, of course, it is Beth has 2 packs of stickers. There are 5 stickers in each pack. For how many stickers does Beth have? The number of packs of stickers Rose has is irrelevant. We see at the end the answer is 10 stickers. Whereas when we get to the question, how many stickers do Rose and Beth have altogether? Again, we discuss which pieces of information do we need. In this instance, of course, we need all of the pieces of information. And then the children, and then we get to the answer. Now, the children then go to task B version 1 or task B version 2. Now, in some instances, the teacher likes to give the children all the same task. Sometimes we think, well, which task is most appropriate? There are different options for you to be able to use. And so task B version 1, in this instance, if I draw out one new technique, which I've referred to in the previous example, it's children being able to discount the irrelevant information. There are 4 red apples. There are 2 green apples. Each apple costs 10p. How many apples are there in total? A space for the picture, and then the children have to choose which answer. Is it 4 plus 2 plus 10 equals 16 apples, or is it 4 plus 2 equals 6 apples? And then second question, then the reasoning is looking at, well, which information is not needed. Whereas task B version 2, we have a look at the first example question, very similar principle. Ben has 5 red apples and 3 green apples. Each apple costs 10p. How many apples does Ben have? And the children have to select which method. One of the things that I find really helpful where the children are selecting which method is I can now scan around the classroom to get a sense of how secure generally are the children here. Which method have they generally chosen? Are there any common misconceptions that are already arising? And then in this instance, there's an extend task where the children have to look at, to answer those questions, which pieces of information do and which pieces of information don't you need. So that's the kind of non-standard challenge that we go into in this instance. I didn't want to feel like I was standing on a soapbox saying, here are the things you can do to deconstruct worded questions, without being practically helpful with making the resources which will hopefully help you to outwork those principles. And not just you, but all the teachers in your class, following this consistent lesson structure and by making the resources. It's taken me a long time, lots of trial and error to create those resources, 3 years. And I'm just delighted to be able to release them. I hope they're going to be really helpful. I hope the principles then spill out into day-to-day lessons as well, where it comes to deconstructing worded questions. I would love to know your thoughts. I hope people take my ideas and take them further, find the problems with my work. I would love to hear comments, questions about the content. I hope it's been really useful. I really appreciate your time following this video. Thank you very much. Have a great day.